Okay, so welcome everyone. Today we're going to do a revision or recap of Informatics 1A. It's just to get you guys refreshed in terms of what you did last semester and get ready for the new semester coming. So what we've done is we've taken one of the either semester tests or exams from last semester and actually just thrown it into the tutorial. So I'll work through it as it covers almost everything we need to know in terms of arrays, and record structures and that, so you get your basic principles back in place and we can work from there. So here we're dealing with a COVID outbreak. Recognize information technologies greatly streamline the current process of paper records. If you want to download the tutorial, it's on Eve already, because I'm going to go through it and then work through the code and do the code with you. You've been approached to develop a Visual Basic application that will help crunch numbers and guide the decision making if the program is good enough. It can be used in other countries as well. So one thing we have to do is a 2-decimal formatting. So the application must store the following information per province. Okay, so we have province name, total for the population in millions. We have information for each metropolitan area, the name, the number of COVID cases per day, which is an array, of course. And then we have, so I see the chat. And then total positive cases, index of the worst metropolitan area, and lockdown. Can everyone see that there's two record structures here? You guys comfortable that there's still two record structures inside this question? Okay. How many arrays are there? Is there one array, two array, three arrays? Good. Those are saying two based on what you're seeing correct. Those are saying three also correct, because we're going to have an array of provinces in each country. Remember, the for each is a general common thing to use to indicate an array, especially informatics, one at least. So when you see that, you're looking at a array. Also, you can see the second array here in terms of the number of cases per day, and each metropolitan has a number of areas. So you have to, or each province has a number of metropolitans. So that you've got to take into consideration as well. From there, we then read in the solution must be handled any number of provinces, metropolitan areas, and days monitoring. We'll then monitor the same number of provinces, metropolitan, and days for each one. The user must input the necessary data, and then we'll start doing calculations of totals, calculating the for each province, calculate, store, and display the index of the metropolitan at the highest number of cases. Define the subroutine, divide D. For each province, calculate, store, and display a province lockdown level. That will go through. Then calculate the average lockdown level for the province. So this we're going to go through together. I think I've missed a part of the question. I'll go and grab it now. In terms of the divide classifications, I think. I must just check. But this will allow us to give us a nice rundown of what you guys covered during Informatics 1A. So it's a refresher on your record structures, on your arrays, on resizing, on placing stuff in the grid, on displaying, etc. So it gives you a rough idea of what you're going to be doing for at least practical one, and also refresh you in terms of what you're going to be doing and what you've learned prior to this for Informatics 1B. So my mouse is jumping all over the place today. I don't know which screen it's on because I've got two visible. Okay, so no, that doesn't help. How many buttons do we actually need for this, by the way? Ladies and gentlemen, 5. Why 5? Can you do everything in one button? or technically Mr. Moses is correct, or Miss Moses, I don't know. I just see T Moses. You can, but it'll be a mess, correct. Remember, we want to make coding as simple as possible to not just you as a developer, but the person that's going to take over. Coding isn't just about typing out code, getting it to work, and then leaving it. We got to make sure the code is manageable after the situation. That's why I spoke about you guys can program now, but we're going to teach you how to program more effectively. Because remember, when you're developing things, it's a case of, okay, cool, I've developed it, I've designed it. Now someone's got to manage it and maintain it. So we must make it modular. Yes. Good. So I'm seeing the right answers coming from you guys. So it must be modular. So we can't just have one button and say that does everything, a big magic button. So we should have enough buttons to make at least a simple setup in terms of what we're doing and how it's going to be working. Also, aligning of buttons and that, try keep it try keep it neat and tidy, not just I'm just going to split my screen a bit. Why is that going away? Give me a second to see what my computer's doing. There we go. Make sure that the code's simple, especially if you can't make a practical session because say there's load shedding in your area and you can't connect to the internet. Make sure that your code is easy for the assistant to actually understand, easy for the person marking you to understand. Because if they don't understand what you're doing, it becomes very difficult to actually award you the correct marks. So I'm just doing the labeling, the naming. That's guys you guys should be quite comfortable with. But don't forget to do the common things like actually name your labels. Don't just give them a name and forget the text or something. Make sure you're doing both the naming and giving the text correctly to everything, just to give us an overall smooth project. So the first button we can use for setup. So this is going to be BTN setup. Second button will be ready for reading in. And technically display. But when I was going through it, did anyone notice what we had to display? I think that's one thing I left out from the actual questions when I was adjusting it last night. Where did I save that? Desktops. Okay. Computer's not working this morning. Okay. So I'll check something quickly because the question actually doesn't indicate what to display exactly. Now, the reason for that is it's in the mark allocation. So for, say, I'll have to update the tutorial on Eve as well, just to make sure it works, goes a bit better. Okay, well, I lie. It's here, display the total number of cases. Is it possible to display everything? Let me ask you that. Can we display every part of this record structure? I never specified how many grids there are. If I had more than one grid? Okay, good. Okay, so you guys, okay, then depending on what you need to display, you can adjust the grid number of grids. So just for tests and semester tests and that, we don't expect you to display everything because the amount of time you have is limited. But depending on where you go in industry, you might need to display more information. So you need to pick the right way of displaying. So just be careful of that. Don't think you only can display certain things. You can display more information, but we're going to stick with the fact that it's asking us just to display the total number of COVID cases reported recorded for each province in each area. So we're going for a specific display, but you can display more if required. So don't just limit yourself there. Try to keep a wide mind about that. But it's important to, I'm just going to change this to read in because it's not going to read in. It's just going to read in. And then we're going to calculate the total and display the total. Okay, btn determine total and spacing and display. So we're going to work with those first and then get to the rest. Display, determine and display total. Read in information and setup. This is province. Spelling's wrong, I apologize. I'm not going to notice it right now. And do I need to use text boxes? Yeah. So it has to be text boxes. Ladies and gentlemen, do we have to use text boxes to read in the number of provinces, metros, and days? Good, good. Okay, so you can use your input box or something like that. It doesn't have to be. Remember, it's your choice as a program. Unless the question specifically says what you must do, it's your choice of the developer. That being said, when you go into industry, it's going to be based on your manager, your team leader, or your client. Depends on what you're doing. If your client wants text boxes, text boxes. If your client wants input boxes, input boxes. So keep that in mind. It's not always your choice as a developer if you're working for a client or a manager or part of a team. So you need to conform to their approach and their standards. So you need to be able to do any way of inputting. So it's not something that you can limit yourself to. Okay. Things that don't change is your option statements. And option infer. Why is option infer off? Any ideas? Why is option infer off? What is the point of option infer being off? Not quite. You're not using it yet. Technically, you are using infer. But why do we turn it off? Any ideas? Okay, that doesn't help. Okay. Prof. Lung said she'll tell you in the second semester, so I guess it's my job now. Have you ever defined a variable without a data type? Have you ever made a variable without declaring a type? Okay. What option infer stops you from doing. Option infer makes you always give a data type to local variables specifically. Your global variables, you have to give a data type. Let's see, number of COVID cases per day. Cases. So I'll try to give an example in the code. Can we have For COVID cases, is it integer or double? Okay, got the right answer. Why integer? All correct, but why integer? What is why do we have to use integer? Why can't we use double? I say. Okay, you can't have half. Here we go. You can't have half a people. Can't have half a person. Okay. So certain things have to be integers, certain things have to be doubles. So good. And you can't have a person half infected, half non-infected. So that'll be very interesting if it happens. Structure, and then ladies and gentlemen, this is not the last time you'll see records, just to let you know. Though we're going to be doing object-oriented programming, when you come to random access files, we'll be doing record structures again. So please don't forget about record completely, as it does come back at a later stage. But an object is basically just a record structure on steroids in terms of its functionality. I see someone raise their hand. You can talk if you want.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if there's a difference when you declare a record structure as when you start with private and when you start with public. What's the difference there?
Oh, I did have a mistake. Good question. Thank you for asking that. Okay. What it means is who accesses it.
Right.
Okay. If you can kill your mic, I'll carry on answering. Okay, that's an excellent question, and that's a typo by me, which is actually a good typo. What the gentleman pointed out there is I've got a public structure. You notice it's not giving me an error at all, right? Nothing underlined, no problems. But is it a good thing? Okay. Public. I'm going to finish what I'm typing, else I'm going to forget. Okay. I'm going to try to see the last message. No, there won't be a problem. That's the more messed up part. Okay, here it's going to give me a problem. Now we're going to start getting problems. This record structure is private. This record structure is public. Public means that anyone can see it. Not just the application, anyone that can see the program can see the structure, if that kind of makes sense. Think of your Facebook account. Most of you have Facebook, or no, most of you have Facebook, to be honest. If you don't have Facebook, very wise person. Now, with Facebook, what type of settings do you have? What control over Facebook do you have?
You can choose who sees your profile and who doesn't. You can choose for it to be your friends only or the public.
Good. Now the question is if everything is, now you have your friends, family, and public profiles on Facebook, right? They only can see certain parts. They only can access certain things. So with doing public, private, we control who can see what and do what. So if everything is public, that means anyone can do anything they like with the information. So by declaring something private means only this program can work with it. And it's a very important thing. Would you want your bank account to be public? So people can withdraw money, not put money in. Okay? So you got to think along those lines. Certain things are private. So that's why we declare them as private. If it's public, we want them to be public in terms of worst case. Okay, so here it's complaining, and this is a very good complaint. It's saying that this structure is private and only this program can see it, but this public is this structure is public, everyone can see it. There's a conflict in control, there's a conflict in access. So this can't be private in this case. Since it's referring to a private structure, the computer is saying, no, you must keep all of it private. A general rule you can take is make as much of the program private as possible to avoid people having access. The more you make public, the more risky your application becomes. And that'll come out in our, when we're doing the classes and objects. Yeah. Sorry, I'm typing and I'm trying to talk to you guys at the same time. I'm not good at multitasking this morning. Yeah, as Mr. van der Westhuizen, public code makes it easier to hack. Okay, so if you want to make your system very, very unsecure, you make everything public. Okay, it's not something you want to do. The more you make private, the better it is. Okay, but we're going to teach you about layers of protection. Here, have you guys ever heard of friend or protected? Okay, so some of you haven't. Okay, those are things we're going to, okay, in ComSci. For those who are not doing ComSci, the informatics students only, that's we're going to talk about is different layers of how much we protect information. Because there's public, the most accessible. There's friend, which is the next most accessible. There's protected, and then there's private. So protected is a better balance, but it's used in certain cases, and we'll show you when to use those. But those are important things to take into consideration. Who has access to it? Okay, is everyone okay with the record structures I've made? No, I'm hoping, look, Reginald, if you have questions about what I'm doing, please ask them. Be it on Discord later today or during Mr. van der Westhuizen's tutorial this afternoon. Ask them, make sure you're comfortable with what we're doing today, so you can also move on quite comfortably. Okay, because if you've got a good foundation from 1A, it makes life easier going forward. And I know most of you would have forgotten a bit of programming over the holidays. Everyone does. If you don't program consistently, you tend to forget certain aspects of programming. So this is just a refresher course, a refresher lecture on what you're doing. So if there's anything I do that you're unsure of, please ask me so you can actually make sure you understand it before we move on. So I've made my two record structures. I now need to make my general one, my private provinces. And then I need my number of days, number of metro, and in province as integers. I then need, let me show you, and I then need a private P, M, and P. Yeah, I'll probably need more variables, but I'll come back to them. What's the first thing I need to do? What's the first thing I need to do in this situation? Okay, ask the user for what? You write in asking the user, obtain dimensions, correct. We need to ask the user how many days, how many months, how many metros, how many provinces. That's the first thing. Can we progress without that information? Not really. We can't set up the grid, we can't set up the array. So as soon as we have that information, we can start to set up our grid, we can start to set up the information we need. So the first thing we do is ask for the number of days for provinces. Okay. Metro, int, arrays. While I'm typing, you guys are more than welcome to ask questions. If I don't see it, Mr. Van der Westhuizen in the background will have answered them as well. So while I've got that going, I now have my dimensions. So as soon as I've got my dimensions, I set up my arrays. And we read them out from the most outer array. Okay. And we start working through all our different arrays, as we have so many of them. I can't spell this morning. We want to then resize our metro areas. And no. We want to resize our and we then want to resize our days per metro. So province metro cases per day days. Okay, so that we've got our array set up at least. So now we need to set up our grid. Everyone keeping up with this? Everyone okay with this? I know it's somewhat boring in terms of you guys have just done this, and some of you probably wrote this paper. But again, it's just a refresher just to get everyone back on the same page with Informatics 1, so we can move on to the 1B course. From here, we then do our grid. The question is, how many rows and how many columns do we need? That's what I normally use Excel to make my life easier. The question says we've got a display. Display the total cases per day. So we're going to have, wait, no, not the total cases per day, total cases per metro area, I think. Just to double check the question. For each metro area in each province, calculate and display the total number of COVID positive cases that have been recorded over all the days. So the total per metro per province. So the question is, are we going to have provinces going down the side? And metros going across the top? Or does it really matter? Ladies and gentlemen, does it matter which one we do? Why does it go? Some say it does matter, some say it doesn't. It's just, it depends on how you want to visualize it. Remember, you're not going to get penalized if you go metros down the side and provinces on the top. Okay, it's more about how you display the information. As long as you are consistent with how you work through the code, it's fine. Okay, so which one do you guys want? Metros, provinces on the top, metros on the side, which one? You guys don't help much. Anyone is good. Provinces on the side, thank you. That makes my life easy as well. Okay, provinces on the side. So we're going to have provinces going down here and metros going across here. Okay, so When we look at the code, let me just close that. Okay. Rows, we're going to have number of provinces plus 1. Columns, we're going to have number of metro plus 1. This is not the final answer. Okay, this is just up to the question at this point. I know we're going to display more information. Okay, but for now, that's what we have read. That's how far as I'm going to go. I'm going to get that to work, and then I'm going to go and add the next row and next column as we need it. So once you've got that, we can start to display the information. So here, I'm going to make my subroutines to make my life easier. Remember, a subroutine is designed to repeat simple tasks. And replace results, PR, is going to be used to place specific information in the grid. Remember, with functions and subroutines, I was always taught one thing by one of my lecturers. It must do one thing and one thing properly. Okay? A subroutine and a function must do one thing and one thing properly. You mustn't overload it with too many functionalities and too many nitty-gritty things. It must do one thing and one thing properly. So in this case, place results puts a value in the grid. That's its job, nothing else. Okay, so it serves its purpose of doing one thing and one thing properly. That's how you generally want to program, is a function, a subroutine must do one thing and do it perfectly. So you can use it again and again and again as needed without worrying about it breaking. Also, we do this to break up the code to make it more modular and easier to edit. So if something's breaking, we know where to look. I'm going to use this one to place labels. Am I missing anything from my subroutine, by the way, for place results? This one. Is there anything missing that you guys think should be here? What should be there? See, someone says something's missing. Okay, I know the grid's going to be bigger. That I know already. I see someone saying bar vowels. Excellent. You guys remember that. So there should actually be a bar vowel here, correct? But do I need, is it complaining? Yeah, all of them. I know that must be all of them. But do I really need to have it there? Okay. This is where you guys can debate. Oddly enough, I don't know what Mr. Van der Westhuizen's thought on this, but my general thought is it's bar vowel by default. I'm not going to put a bar vowel if it's already there. Visual Studio sets it to bar vowel by default, so I don't put it there. I don't see the reason to add a bar vowel if it's already bar vowel. If it's, I have to change it to a bar ref, by all means put the bar ref. But the bar vowel, it's already there, so why add it? Okay, but that depends on the languages as well. In other languages, I know in comp sci, C++, they don't have a bar. They don't have like a bar vowel thing. It's by default bar vowel. You only have the option to make it like an out, and most of the languages do the same. So most languages assume it's bar vowel, and then if they want to make sure it goes out, I see Mr. Van der Westhuizen added a comment, because it's by default, you do not need to have explicit specify the bar vowel keyword. Yeah, and I agree, it produces noisy code. And yeah, if you guys can read that in chat, just to, I don't know if it's going to come across in the video for those who are going to watch it later on. Bar ref, if you have bar vowel everywhere, and then you suddenly have a bar ref, you're going to miss the bar refs. Noisy code. Code with an excessive amount of declarations or excessive amount of variables or excessive amount of bar vowels or extra code that's not needed. Okay, you want to keep the code as simple and clean as possible. And that's the thing is, coding remember, like I mentioned earlier, this code is I've got to give to someone else to work on. If the code is in a mess, and I've seen professors' codes, not Prof. Lungs, other professors, their code is so bad that no one can actually go back into it and edit it. Okay, I'm talking about a professor that left the university when I started here. His code was so bad that no one could actually read his code. So it's helpful to have code that makes sense and is not excessively bad to read through. Yeah. Look, he was a bloody the lecturer. Prof. Hardy was an absolute genius. There's no doubt about that. But his coding, he coded in a way that only he could code afterwards. But he was an exceptionally gifted person in programming. But that's him. But you guys are going to be working in teams, so you must be able to program in such a way that it's easy for your teammates and colleagues to understand. So we want to make sure that it is clean, easy to read. That's where commenting comes in. I haven't commented anywhere here. So technically I still need to do commenting, what each thing is doing. But I'm writing it in a way that it's neat enough, it's not noisy, that it is fairly easy to read without the comments. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't comment. It still means I must comment. This is P0. It's a P. Okay. As promised, I'll show you what I'm going to show you what option infer doesn't do. So I'm going to take option infer off and do this. Okay. Now the question is, ladies and gentlemen, do I have a variable age? Is it complaining? No. Okay. I've declared a variable and the Visual Studios has inferred the data type integer. I'm hoping, because every year they change our Visual Studios, that this will not give an error. There. Okay. Now it's giving an error because I've taken the inferability away. Now it's saying, okay, what the hell is age? You got to tell me what age is. So option 4, make sure that you give a data type to your variables. So without option 4, we can create a variable, not give a data type, and let the computer decide what data it should be, which causes a risk in the assigning of values. So we don't want the computer to decide, oh no, this is a variable, this is a double, this is a string. We as the programmer, we decide what the data type is. Okay, in some languages, that's how you program with it, deciding, but in Visual Studios, we want to, VB at least, we want to make sure we decide what it is. I'm going to use the M, which I declared earlier. So PR M, not brackets, M0. There's no default type. So by default, VB uses the auto. Kind of. Okay, so the question I got in chat is, so by default, what data type would it be set to? In that case, the age would default to an integer because it's being used in a for loop. So let me show you another example of it. Here, H is being defaulted to a string. Okay, so we don't want to have a situation where it's auto-inferring stuff. We want to make sure that we're deciding that, no, this is actually a string or integer, because we're not sure that it will infer the correct type. Correct. So the question in chat is the default type is set based on the function of the variable, yes. Whatever the variable is going to be used for, it defaults to that. Okay. Then the system will infer the data types. We don't want you to do that. We want you to explicitly define the data types. It's not the best programming practice to allow data types to be decided by the program. Okay, we want to make sure that the data types are assigned by us so we don't enter incorrect information. Because there's a chance the user enters information that's not correct. So remember, we want to make sure the program has as few errors as possible. The more control, the more structure we put into our code, the less possible errors can occur when it's running. So if we have our variables that can auto-assign their types, we have a higher chances of an error occurring in the code when it's running. Okay, so we want to avoid that situation as much as possible. It's on by default, yes. That's why we turn it off. There's a newer feature added to Visual Studio a few years ago, but it's not something we want to actually use because the chances of it inferring the wrong data is high. I know, again, someone pointed out that the grid is set too small. I know that. But right now, I'm just doing the basics of getting it to work. I'll increase the size of the grid as we need it, as the questions demand it. So if I run the program now, let's just check it actually works. It's always a good thing to continually test your code after each subsection. Don't always wait for the last minute to check. Are the labels there? It resized correctly 2 provinces, 3 metros, but are the labels there? Why not? Any ideas? Why are my labels not appearing in the grid? No. Yes. I didn't call the subroutine. Excellent. Okay. Remember, subroutines are as useful as I don't know what the right wording is. Subroutines are only as useful as can be as useful when you call them. They don't serve a purpose unless they're being called. So unless we actually call it and say place labels, it's never going to work. It's extremely lazy. Okay. So we must make sure that we call our subroutines to make sure they actually are invoked and are being used. That's too many. I did something wrong. Okay. What do I do? Oh, there we go. 0, M. There's my grid setup. I know I'm going to have to have more rows and columns, but we'll get there. I'm also keeping track of time as we've got to get through everything still. Okay, so now we need to read in, and we need to read in the name, the total populace, the metro, the number of cases. So here we're going to start with provinces. And we can work through that. Name equals input box, There's my complete map there. The population. Variables. I got the question, should you declare the variables first? Which variables are you referring to?
Oh, so sir, can I talk?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so in Informatics 1A, we used to like the local variables, the P, the ones that you're going to use to loop. So we used to
Yeah.
declare them.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I had that habit as well, but I kind of broke it because the thing is, I would keep declaring so many local variables that gets annoying.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I'm going to use P, M, and D in almost every single button.
Okay, sir. So is
So
that
yeah, it's acceptable. If you want to, look, if you still want to use the local variable, you're welcome to. I have no
okay?
issue. I'll
Also,
show you another way.
okay.
Sorry?
I was saying, is it fine that we use the old style that we use, that we are normally comfortable with, and then as the time progresses, we incorporate your own style and all that?
No, you can stick to your style. It's fine, as long as it works.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, it's a good question. Okay, I know a lot of you guys are comfortable with doing the local variables like this, as the gentleman referred to. The problem is, I found when you're doing a lot of these programs, is if you notice, I'm using PM, I'm using PM, I'm using PM, I'm going to use D as well. So I'm using those variables in almost every single button. So it kind of gets annoying to keep declaring them. So I declare them as global variables and just use it throughout. It does have an impact on memory because I take up a little bit of memory, but why she's in bad practice? I don't know. Okay. I think that's more of a programming style. There's also this way for those who want to try it. You can declare the variable as inside the actual for loop. So I'm declaring P as an integer while I'm using it. Also valid. Okay, I don't know if this would be bad practice or not. If you're going to be using a variable in almost every single button, I wouldn't say it's bad practice. If you're going to use a variable once, then yeah, maybe bad practice to have it global. But if it's going to be a consistent variable, it's more important to have it accessible and don't make confusions or mix-ups. But it's not wrong to have them at all. Don't get me wrong there, it's not an issue. Okay, that's a good point. For beginners, it's terrible if you forget to reset the variable. But this is the important point. Where am I using the P's, the DMs, and the D's? Where am I using these specifically? Have a look at the code. Where's the only time you see them? In the loops. Now, the for loop has a unique feature of always setting it back to the 1 when you start. So a for loop will say it's equal to 1 and go forward. So the chances of me forgetting to reset is very slim because I'm using them just for the loops. If I was using these for something else, then yes, I'd run the risk of not resetting it. That's a good point. That is a good point. But I'm using them in the loops. That means I'm always resetting them. There's no option. I have to reset them. Because they're in a for loop and going from 1 to, I'm default resetting them. So I don't have that risk of forgetting because the way I'm using it. And programming is a style. Don't ever That's the one thing I think you guys need to also start to get used to, is programming is a style. Everyone programs slightly different, which is good. That's how we actually pick up who's cheating or copying. Your programming is almost identical. But your style, it's like art. Everyone that programs has their own way of programming the loops, the programming, anything. It's just the way we work. So it's not really a problem. It's just a way of handling a specific situation. So there's no real pros and cons on certain things. Now here it's important to actually try and put the D's, the M's, and the P's to make it a bit easier to understand which for loop belongs to which one. Okay, I'm missing the D. Remember, always in arrays, we always must have the index. Feed into the number. That's a null. Okay, so that's my reading in done. Everyone okay with that? I think once you get the reading in, it gets a bit easier. Because once you've got the data, it makes it easier to work with. And then we got to display the total. So let's go and do display input and display total. So here we're going to work out a total. We have a low variable for it, so we're good there. Okay. So we start off with the provinces. Then we go into each province, each metro. Okay, for M equals 1 to metro, province P dot metro area M dot total. And what do we need to do with total? What am I trying to do with total right now, ladies and gentlemen? What's the one thing you always must do with the total before you start to work with it? Initialize, good. Okay, we initialize to 0. We started off at 0. The same as when you open a bank account, what do you start with? R50. Normally you start a bank account with a 0 and you've got to add money. Which bank do you use? Let's have a look at that bank. Okay, did Prof long teach you short script, shorthand? You have seen the plus equal symbol before? Okay, good. That makes my life a lot easier. And as you'll notice, I'm doing a lot of copy and pasting just to save a bit of time, as we don't have an excessive amount of time. Now, what are you complaining about? Okay, I was complaining I didn't know which metro I was talking about. So I was missing the M. Okay, so when I typed like that, so I got confused on which metro I'm talking about. Remember, it's important to make sure that you're keeping track of your arrays. And P. Now, where do we put the place? Now we got to display the total. This is the first one we start to display. We have option, I'll give you the options. 1, Which option do we use to display? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Good. Got 2 people saying option 2. Option 2. Okay. Why do we need to use option 2? Let me ask you guys that while I take a sip of Monster. Depth of the loops, correct? We need to display, this is the important part, to put information here in any of these locations. We need to know which metro and which province, correct? We need to have the M value and the P value. Those will dictate the position in the grid. So we go to the loop point where we still have M and P. So at position 2, we still have access to a correct value of M and a correct value of P. If we go to position 3, we get the incorrect value of M. We get an M plus 1 value, which is outside the size of the grid. So I'll show you what happens here at 2, and then I'll show you what happens at 3. So you're asking an idea. As it needs to loop the innermost dimensions. You're on the right. That actually, yes. Base results. Now it's PM provinces, P metro, M. Also, an easy way to pick it out. This line of code, what we're displaying, requires both the P and the M. So it must be inside the P and the M for loop. It can't be inside the D for loop because we don't refer to the D for loop at any point in time. But we do refer to the M and P for loop. So it must be within those two. If it's here, so say we put it at location 3. The value of M will be M plus 1, so it'll go outside the grid every time. So what will happen is, instead of going here, it'll end up going here every time, in terms of the grid. So that's our grid for say. If we go and have it where we are now, at this position, it'll go and try and display here, M plus 1. Because we're after the for loop. If we're outside the for loop, we're sitting with the M plus 1 value. We want it to display in these locations. So it must have a M value that is correct. So it's in that location. Does that make sense, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, cool. The next question is, each province calculate and store the index. Sorry, I'm just reading the question. In question 0.5, so you all can see what I'm talking about. For each province, calculate, store the index of the metropolitan area that had the highest total number of COVID cases, using the index to display the name of the metropolitan in each area for the province. Okay, so for each province, we need to know which metro was the highest total. Yeah, cancel it. So we need, firstly, we need an extra column. Okay. So here we go and say place results 0 in metro plus 1, and we call this highest total. So that I've increased the size of the columns to handle the new one, highest total. Now I need to work out which metro area in each province has a problem case. So now I could do this in a button, yes. So this would be, here's my properties, property window. So this would be highest metro. In highest metro. Okay. So this is going to calculate the name of the metro with the highest infection rate. Now, I'm going to use a function. Okay. I'm going to use a function to make my life easier because I have to calculate multiple multiple highest. So I'm going to make a function for this one. You don't have to, it's just how I process things. Metro, we're going to need an array. Okay, so we're going to need cases as integer. Actually, we're comparing the totals per metro and we're storing it there. I'm just making sure I've got the question right in my head. So we're going to be passing a metro. No, that won't work. That won't work. Okay, let's not avoid that approach. Thinking about it now. Okay, sometimes overcomplicating or oversimplifying doesn't get you the right approach. So you can adjust as you go. So for each province, we need to work out the highest. So we need a dim variable, total max as integer, dim index as integer. Every time we loop through, the total max will equal the province p dot metro 1 dot total, and index, of course, equals 1. Now for each metro, I have to go and say if m is greater than total max, then total max equals m and index equals m. Okay, and then we need to store it inside variable d. So that I would do after this. I'd say province p dot index of worst cases equals index. And then I need to display the name of the metro with the problem case. So this one, remember, we know we've got the index. So what we need to do is say p in metro plus 1, and we need to display the province p dot metro And this is where it might get a bit weird. Or confusing some of you, but so what I've done is I've got my local variables. Now here, since these two variables, I'm only going to use in this one button. I'm not going to make them global. They exist for one button and one button only. So yes, local variables. So for every province, I reset the total max and index back to the first metro area. Then I loop through all the metros, determine which metro has the highest cases. And then once I've finished that, once I'm finished checking, I set the worst index equal to index. And then I display the name of the metro that has the worst index. Okay, I could technically use index, but we're using the information we stored and not changing that. Everyone okay with that? But again, don't worry, the video is going to be uploaded on YouTube and Eve later today. And then there'll be Mr. Van der Stays, and we'll be doing this with you guys as well. For the other students that want to join, it'll be done again this afternoon. Now I need to do a, hopefully we'll finish in time. I'm also keeping track of that. I don't want to not finish in time. We need to make a function, private, caps on. Please don't type with cap lock on, that just annoys sometimes. A private subroutine, divide by b, accepts two parameters called divisor as an integer parameter and returns. Okay, this is where the ByRef would come in. So we have two parameters, divisor as integer, then we have divided as integer, and here we have our ByRef, return value. Okay, as double. Now, if you look at that, is it easy to pick up which is the ByRef? What about deleted? If we look at this subroutine, is it easy to pick up that the last one is ByRef? Because we don't have these bar-val. We immediately see that one's ByRef because it's separate. That's what also Mr. Van der Westhuizen was saying about noisy code. We're immediately drawn to the odd one out because it doesn't have something here. We know this is ByRef, so we know we can work with it. And it's provided by devise I can't spell. And that's a subroutine. Nothing much to it. Okay, so ByRef, main one for the point coming out. So ByRef allows us again, so for those who maybe forgotten, ByRef means by reference, means we're giving a copy and we can modify it. Is it double? Except two parameters, double parameters called. Let's just check the question again. I think you are right on that one. Accepts two parameters, a double parameter called divisor as an so divisor is a double. Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's move on and see if we can get this. Hopefully, aha, that's what I was looking for. I have to update the tutorial. Oh crap, I've just opened something I wasn't supposed to open. That I can close quickly. Yeah. This is what I thought I'd missed. That's right. Let's see how you determine the cases for question 7. Okay, so I'll update the tutorial as that was missing from it. Okay, let's hit question 7 and hopefully we're not going to run over time. Highest Metro. This is going to be what? For each province, calculate install. The lockdown level is calculated by looking at the ratio between the province. Okay, so this is lockdown level. Down. BTN lock level. Okay. So it is calculated by looking at the ratio between province population and the number of COVID cases for the worst metropolitan area in the province. Remember, the record structure currently stores the province population field in a number of millions. It actually is and that's how we do the cases. So first we've got to work out the ratio, and that's where the divisor comes in. I just need to make sure I'm doing it properly. Because this one will get a bit confusing in terms of what you're dividing, what you're working with. And so I want to wait. Okay, so I want to make sure I'm with my advice as well on these type of questions, ladies and gentlemen, is make sure you actually read the questions carefully. And if you're unsure of a question, ask, email us. You can use Discord. You can email us whenever a test is actually occurring to ask questions. So if you're unsure of something, like this, for instance, ask, post a message and ask it, because it can be a bit of a confusing question, because it requires us to convert things to a million and then a ratio. So we've got to go through each province. So let's start the outer structure. And we've got to get a result per province. Okay, we've got to work out the lockdown value per province in this divisor situation. So we're going to get a dim result as a double. We also can get a dim pop as double. This might make it a bit easier. The pop is population. Because we're getting population in the millions, we need to put it back into that. So a person can say there's 1.56 million. Our calculation needs to go back into the millions to work correctly. So we got to say pop is equal to province P dot, what the hell? No. P dot total population times a million. 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now we have our population back in the correct value from the user, because the user is going to give us in the millions. We need to put it back into the correct structure. Now we can use the divide by D. Okay, and we need to get the ratio. I just want to make sure I'm getting the ratio correctly. It's the population divided by the worst situation. Okay, so it's pop, comma, province P, and then it's got metro and province again. Actually, this gets very confusing. Let's also do dim worst as integer. Worst will equal province P dot metro area province P dot worst indexed dot total. I understand why I'm trying to break it up. So I'm trying to make it a bit as easy as possible to actually comprehend what we're trying to do or see what we're trying to do without having a very complex string of divide by E. So we go pop worst results. Okay, so that'll take the population and divide it by the number of worst, or divisor. So the worst divided by the population. Okay, so it's the other way around. So that'll give us our ratio, which is result. Now we feed this into a select case to determine the lockdown level. Hopefully this is making sense, but it'll all be explained again this afternoon. Let's zoom in a bit. So we have these options. We have less than 1.5, we have 1.26 and greater than 6. So we're going to filter those in into the select case, and we're going to work from there. So is less than 0.15. Lockdown level is 1. So province P dot lockdown equals 1. Case 0.15 to 0.6. 2, and case is greater than 0.6. Province is 3. Now I need to display this. Okay, so this is per province. So again, we're going to go back up to our setting the size of our where is it? Metro and make it 3, and we're going to add in a lockdown level. Lockdown level. We can go back up and go here and say PRP, comma, in metro plus 2 and convert to string, province lockdown. So that solves question 7, which is the lockdown. Okay, calculate and display the overall average lockdown level for all the provinces. This should be displayed in a text box. That's the last question. So we need one more button and a text box. And we should just finish on time. This is going to be BPN lockdown, not local, lockdown average lockdown average. This is going to be txt lockdown average. Okay, so here we have total as integer, as double, and average as double, for p equals 1 to number of provinces. And then we go and say total equals 0, not inside the loop, because inside the loop we're going total plus equals to actually get the lockdown levels. Okay, if you guys are wondering how to get the auto list to pop up, I'm doing control spacebar. That's how I get those lists to pop up every time I want them. Average equals total divided by number of provinces. I hope I'm doing this question correctly. txt text.convert to string average. Just make sure I've done it correctly. Okay, I have almost done it correctly. If we go back to the question, it asks us to put it in the correct format of a 2 decimal. So how do I do the 2 decimal format for those who are still online? What approach to how do I make it in the 2 decimal format? Because this will give me a multiple decimal format. It's not going to control. Format command, good. So we go format. We give it the average and we give it the format we want, 0.00. So that forces it into the 2 decimal format. Okay, thankfully I finished this in time, even though we did a full session, a full test and while explaining code and that. I know I haven't run it. Thing is, running it will take a bit of extra time. I don't want to waste you guys' data in that. Are there any questions, anything you're unsure of that I've done in this tutorial? Again, this is just a refresher for Informatics 1A, so you guys just remember what you did last semester and are ready to go for the semester. So the purpose of today's tutorial was just to remind you what you did last semester. Tomorrow we'll have a normal lecture at, well, there'll still be another tutorial today by Mr. Van Westhuizen, so you can see his style of programming. Then tomorrow at 10 to 2 we'll have the lecture. That's when we're going to start the new work for the semester. We're going to start recursion. And then we have a tutorial on Thursday at 1 o'clock. That'll be a Q&A session type approach to go through certain information. Can you explain the conversions of doubles to millions again? Are you talking about, where is it? This one. Okay, so what we're getting here, if we look at the question, we're getting the population like this, 14.459 in millions. Now, that's not going to work correctly when we do a divide by total cases, because it's going to be more than 14. So we need to take this and convert it back into the millions. So all we do is in the code, we say that the total population, which is 14.4, times 1 million to make it 14 million ... So we're forcing it back into the correct ratio, because when the person enters information, so let's do an example of entering information quickly. Don't worry if you missed the tutorial session. It is recorded there is going to be another tutorial, exactly the same content this afternoon by Mr. van der Westhuizen. So you can join that one, or you can watch this one, up to you. So when you read information in, just to answer the question before this, we're going to go province A, total population. Instead of saying 14 million, we're going 14. So when we do our calculation, we're going to take that value and actually convert it back into the millions. So that's why I'm converting this value here as total population times 1 million to bring it back into the 1 million value. So it does match up to our population or infection, because we might have 30 people infected, which is good, but our population is 14, so it doesn't work correctly. Does that answer your question? Okay. Again, this has been recorded. I'll upload it to, again, all the videos uploaded to Eve are only going to be there for a month. So in a month, I'll delete them, and as we go through, they'll cycle in. But all the uploads will be on YouTube and on Blackboard as well. But I know Blackboard downloads are quite heavy. So if you want the ones on Eve, I'll try to compress them as much as possible so it doesn't show too much data. But again, the tutorial will be this afternoon at, that's a late tut, 5:10. Mr. van der Westhuizen will have his tut. He'll go over this and help other students that have problems. So it just depends on which one you want to attend. But we'll cover pretty much the same content. You guys, a good overview of the work. But that's it. Any other questions, please post them. I'm actually going to stop recording now. If you got any other questions,